All right, so welcome to biology. This is the introductory lecture of Bio 101. So the very first lecture of an entire year sequence. A lot of you will be going forward from here and taking that Bio 102 section. Everything you learn in Bio 101, I will expect you to understand in Bio 102 because that's the way those sequences work. I don't want to go back and reteach things. So this is the introductory lecture. We're using the Biology in Focus textbook, 2nd edition. This is from chapter 1. So the first chapter. And I'm going to begin with that open question, what is science? So out to you guys, what is science? Yeah, what is science? Okay. So it's big. Let me see if I got you, right? So science is a process. That's one part of it. Science is a process where you're going to use data. You're going to use your observations. This is what you're taking in about the world in order to make conclusions using the scientific method, which is this big problem-solving methodology. Is that general what it is? That's really, really good. Anybody else have another definition? What a functional definition of science? So otherwise, we can just go with that. Yes. Oh. The study of how, that's the really simplified form. The study of how things work, how you can understand the world. You look at something, you try and figure it out. And we all do that. We try to figure out the way the world works. Ultimately, science is verifiable and science is testable. If you remember nothing else, remember, science is testable. We're going to use observation, investigation, in order to explain phenomena. It's all about, like you said, building a more complete understanding of the world, figuring out how the world works. Oh, remember earlier I told you guys glow-in-the-dark strawberries? There they are. Yeah, okay, those are strawberry plants. They're glowing, sorry. The fruit also glows, but those were the initial results. Yes? Do you write everything? So, okay, test note-taking stuff. Do you have to write everything? No, you don't have to write everything. You have access to all of these notes. You'll have access to video on this. I would write the important things. If you want and you feel like you want to print off the PowerPoints and just write sort of notes off in the margins, feel free to do that. But when I say something's really important, like science is testable, that's probably something to write down. You guys will probably hear later on I'll say this will be on the exam. When I say this will be on the exam, I'm really not kidding. That'll be on the exam. Like if I was to say, what's the difference between science and pseudoscience? Exam question right there. What's the difference between science and pseudoscience? The answer is science is testable. Pseudoscience is not. Pseudoscience is this cool, well, it's not cool, it's actually horrible. Pseudoscience is where you're going to use vague, exaggerated, or untested claims. You see pseudoscience all the time now. If you are on any social media whatsoever, like 90% of the posts there are absolute pseudoscience. There's an over-reliance on confirmation rather than refutation. This one time, I put Jell-O on my head, and it cured my headache. Pseudoscience. I'm not going to go around putting Jell-O on my head anymore. I'm totally going to put Jell-O on my head some more because it feels really good. But aside from that, it's not going to cure my headache. There's a lack of openness to testing by other experts. I'm sure you guys have done this, and maybe you haven't. Do you guys know the History Channel? You know conceptually of the History Channel. Now, the History Channel, surprisingly enough, used to be about history. Yeah, remember? It's like the World War II channel pretty much. All the time. But now, ancient aliens. Ancient aliens all the time. There were two issues that spring to mind. One is ancient aliens. You know, the guy who's like, aliens. They were talking about pyramid power. You see, in this lab, they built a copper pyramid. And the pyramid in the lab lifted into the air and started hovering and spinning. And they were talking about this as this new energy source. So other scientists said, that's really cool. We want to do that. I want to do that in my lab. And the people in the first lab said, oh, you can't. It won't work in your lab. It only works in my lab because my lab lies on a ley line. Like, okay, lack of openness to testing. Another one is a psychic by the name of Uri Geller. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this guy. So Uri Geller is a 1980s. So I was a child of the 80s. He was a psychic who could bend spoons. So you're right. And if you ever look at these spoons that bend back and forth, he would do it with his mind. And he said, how do you put this? He said, I can bend these spoons. And scientists said, we want you to come into the lab and do this under controlled conditions. We want to see this. And he's like, I can't do it there. I can only do it where I'm comfortable. Lack of openness to testing. An absence of progress. Have you guys ever heard of a field called astrology? What is astrology? Exactly. Most people say it's the study of like the moon and the stars. It's not. It's the zodiac. It's studying how do the stars affect us. What's the other one where you're studying the planets and the stars and everything? Astronomy. There's a big difference.
Well, astrology is interesting because when you get deeper into it, you actually are looking at where the sun and the moon is along the zodiac belt.
No, I totally understand. You're looking at that historically, but what you're experimenting with, what you're determining is how does that affect people? And this was something that was studied in depth during the time of Ptolemy, 2,500 years ago. Since then, we've not progressed forward with it. It's all the same. And you guys open up, you guys still do that, don't you? Like, open up, like you have a newspaper.
There has been a recent development since then in astrology, but it's not what they call like widely accepted. But there's an additional sign.
Oh, well, I'm not even concerned about it. Sorry, doesn't bother me. There's an additional sign in the zodiac. Yay, don't care. But the big thing is there's lack of progress on how does this affect people. 2,500 years, nothing's happened. Pseudoscience. Personalization of the issues today. Everything is personalized. Everything is attacking somebody instead of their research. When you're attacking somebody and not attacking the quality of their research, you've got pseudoscience and the use of misleading language. Cancer can be cured. Just buy my book and I'll tell you. Scientific tests prove Lucky Strike is milder than any other principal brand. Well, they're super mild. Scientific tests said so. Scientists must, therefore it's science. No, it's pseudoscience. And my favorite, honest to goodness, real life lecture at a college. James Caper's Methods and Practices of Psychic Defense from Hostile Invaders from Another Planet. Now, pseudoscience. Why is that pseudoscience? Yeah, right. There's a lot going on, but this is pseudoscience. It could be science. How could it be science? How about that? If we could do it multiple, if we could test it and test it and test it and test it. Oh, this is even better. We need a hostile invader from another planet. Yeah, we need an alien. So you got to sit across the table from the alien and be like this. Attack me. Hostile invaders. Pseudoscience versus science. What is the difference then between science and pseudoscience? Science is testable. And there's the one thing you should have written down. Well done. No, you were just asking. Of all of this, what do you need to write down? Science is testable. Mark Twain. If you have not yet read Mark Twain in your life, you need to. Any of you guys going into English? Composition? Okay. You've read Mark Twain, right? Oh, a long time ago. He's brilliant. Yeah, well, of course they've been blacklisted because he's brilliant. What did he say? He said, it's easier to fool people than convince them that they have been fooled. That is very true. The first time somebody learns something, and I'm taking all these education classes. The first time somebody learns something, that is what's termed their meaning perspective. That is where they build their initial thoughts on something. And from then, it's all about challenging that. And people don't like to be challenged. Easier to fool people. And you guys probably all have that one uncle or cousin that you don't get along with. Do you guys know what I'm talking? Yeah. I got it. I've got this guy. I'm going to say it because my cousins will watch this and be like, I hate your dad. My Uncle Larry is the most bigoted, horrible person you will ever meet. I do not go to family functions anymore because I don't like him. But back when I was younger and naive, I thought, maybe he just needs somebody to talk to him about this. That was a mistake. So after several Halloweens, like we get together at Halloween, Thanksgivings of argument, I realized he is this way, he has been this way his whole life, and he is not going to change. It was easy to convince him of something. He is dead convinced of every single conspiracy theory out there, yeah. And there's nothing I can do to change his mind. He is convinced, and I can't convince him that he's been fooled. Actually, he's pretty convinced now that I'm part of the conspiracy. I'm the part of the Illuminati. I'm the scientific elite. An idea will become pseudoscientific when the science cannot be separated from the ideology. We all have preconceived notions. We all have strongly held beliefs. It's going to be up to us to sort of put those beliefs aside and look at the data. We live in an area here, I've noticed, where everything is like an organic fruit, or you can buy organic, or you can buy like modified foods or engineered foods. And there's a strong feeling that organic foods are better. I could put 1,001 pieces of documentation in front of them that says there's no difference. But they have been fooled, and it's hard to convince them that they've been fooled. And of course, people will say, go the other way. With me, they'll say, look, here's all this information about how organic food is better. You're a geneticist. Look at this data. And of course, you'll come to the same conclusion I have. Yeah. Everything is carbon-based, right? Organic foods. You guys have strong beliefs on this, one way or the other, right? You don't have to tell me which way, because you know which way I go, and you don't want to admit that. But you've got a belief. Climate change. You've got a belief. It's either happening or it's not happening. But no matter what anybody tells you, you're going to have a hard time changing your mind about it. Does that make sense? There are few people that can look at new data and bring it in and incorporate it into who they are and change their mind. I need you to be those people. I need you to be the ones who will take new data, bring it in, synthesize it, and create something new. An idea is pseudoscientific when we've stopped listening and stopped bringing in new content. It's we have faith in something more than we can rationally believe in it. All right, so life. Check this out. The most important question I'm going to need you guys to ask for the rest of your life is the same question the 5-year-old kid asks. Why? Why? Everything why. Look at this. Check out this fish. It's got a completely transparent head. Yeah, that's right. Those are its eyes. And they're gigantic. Why? That's okay. Well, that's an answer. That's not a question. It is on planet Earth. Star-nosed mole. Right, but why? Why? That's not. Well, okay, maybe we can test it. To get worms, it's like, hey, look, you got friends. Perception, feeling things around it. Oh, I got a fun story about a star-nosed mole. So I have a mole in my yard. Perhaps you guys have moles in your yard all over the place. It was pouring rain just a few weeks ago, as if it doesn't ever not pour rain. And this mole jumps out of the ground, scurries across my driveway, and jumps into the other side. And my wife turns to me and said, "Quick, go out there and save him." I was like, "I've been trying to kill him for 3 weeks. This is not the time to save him." Water, drowning. This thing, you guys see it, right? Little sort of gecko right there. Why? That's an easy one, right? Camouflage. It's hidden. So it can sneak up on things, or other things can't sneak up on it. Always ask why. The world is constantly changing. The problem is, it's not the natural world. It tends not to change much over our lifetime. So it seems like the world is set. It seems like the world is static. The animals that are here now are the animals that have always been here, because our lives are so short. But over lots and lots of time, over many millennia, heritable traits can accumulate. Oh, I've tied myself up. This is wild mustard. Wild mustard, it looks almost like ragweed, pollen. You know, I just call it pollen plants, the yellow ones. Humans began culturing that, began cultivating it. And we created lots of different strains of food from it. It's wild mustard, Brassica, not rapa, but Laricia. We've got Brussels sprouts that come from it, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, and kale all come from the same root plant. They have all been selectively chosen by humans. These are very different looking plants with very different amounts of different tastes, different everything. But they all came from the same base. This has happened over the course of human civilization. Just a few thousand years, we've gone from wild mustard to cabbage. Over time, plants change. It may not be terribly detectable in our lifetime, but over the long haul, big changes accumulate. So here in biology, we're going to pose questions about the living world and seek answers through scientific inquiry. It's all about the study of life. So far, so good? In this course, we have four core themes that are united by the central theme of evolution. Organization, the expression and transmission of genetic information, the transfer and transformation of energy, and how organisms interact with other organisms in the environment. So these are the four big things we're looking at. These are the themes that you'll see repeated over and over and over again. First off, we have organization. When you're studying life on Earth, you're going to note that there's a scaling issue. You can look at the very, very, very bottom, down at the size of the atom. And then atoms will come together and form molecules. Molecules will form organelles. Organelles will form cells. Cells will form tissues. Tissues form organs. Organs form organ systems. Organ systems, organisms. Organisms form populations, and so on. It's organized. It's broken down bit by bit by bit. You can move up, you can move down. But there's an organization to everything. Interestingly enough, life is self-organizing. Again, I do a whole lecture in Bio 102 about self-organization leading to initial properties of life. Reductionism is where you're zooming into a finer and finer scale. So what it says is you take a complex system, a human, you guys, and you break them down bit by bit by bit by bit by bit until they're really, really small. You zoom in on it. You guys have played with your phone's camera, I assume, where you do the whole zoom in. So you go from seeing the whole picture to a really narrow focus of it. And then you can go farther and farther and farther in, and you see more detail of just that one area. But the problem is you tend to lose some of the bigger picture. As a biologist, you need to keep in mind the bigger picture as you're looking closer and closer in. when we begin to look at the different levels of organization, we see these things called emergent properties. So if you begin at the molecular level, the atom, you move to the molecule to the organelle, and so on, and you're zooming out. You're starting to see the bigger picture. You begin to see properties that begin to get established only when those smaller pieces interact with each other. They're called emergent properties. The more of these things that you have interacting, the more complex processes you get. This is the inside of a watch. Now you can look very closely at a watch. You know, you look at it at the atomic level. You see iron, you'll see aluminum, brass, so on. That doesn't tell you much. You move farther out. You start to see the molecules that they formed, how they're interacting chemically. But you move even farther out and you start seeing gears. Now an individual gear doesn't do anything. You can't determine the function of a watch just from a single gear. But when you start seeing them put together, you go even farther out. That's where the emergent property comes. Now we get the ability to tell time. So reductionism is when you're really focusing in and you start to see emergent properties only when you've zoomed back out. And those emergent properties are what we're really, really interested in biology. One of my most common sayings in this class, and I will say it over and over and over again, and again, for those who are writing things down, which is hopefully is all of you, I think on just about every exam, I will have some question on there that talks about the form determines what. And it's always going to be form determines function. It is a key underlying principle of biology. Form determines function. At each level, we find a correlation between structure and function. See, it's right there too. So the question then is, does function ever determine form? I'm going to go with no, because you always get the form first, based on, and it comes down to those mechanisms of evolution. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? It's actually the egg. It's the egg because there's a mutation in the egg, or there's variation in the egg. Yeah, now we know. So whenever anybody asks you the question, I took Bio 101, I learned the answer. Chicken or the egg? It's the egg. Here we've got a stingray. Have you guys seen stingrays underwater? It looks like they're flying underwater. And that's because water is really just super thick air. Don't try and breathe it. Fun story. When I was younger, I learned that oxygen is dissolved in water. Now, I was young and stupid, and I thought to myself, well, if oxygen's dissolved in water, and I know how diffusion works, and we'll get to that later, if I take a deep breath while I'm underwater, I should be able to get oxygen out of it. I was 8 at the time, and I was in a bathtub. And I started coughing. My parents were like, what's wrong? And I was like, I tried to breathe the water. Like, we're just going to concentrate on your sister. Penguin. It's got these little flappy things. Wings is what they're called, but flappy things works. Because stingray also has flappy things. Little different, but same basic structure. Wide, jutting out from the sides. And what's it used for? And that's swimming or flying. Flying through water, because water is just super thick air. Flying fish. What do they use their flippers for? Well, you're like, oh, I want to say swimming, but they're flying fish. They use them for both. That form, these long extended appendages with very thin and very wide, thin but wide, allows for movement through both air and through water. I mean, penguins don't fly, but when you look at them underwater, it looks like they're flying. No, but I don't want to either, because I want to get through the class. Sorry, we'll talk later. As we move up in complexity, as we move up in organization, we hit the cell. Now, you guys have all heard of the cell, right? You've studied it. You've probably drawn pictures of it or had to label pictures. Ooh, labeling pictures. I hate labeling pictures. That's like my least favorite thing in the world because cells don't look like that. I'm going to go on in about 3 weeks. I'm going to go off because one of my biggest pet peeves is this picture. And you know why? It all stems back to the mitochondria. This is the mitochondria. Okay, I'm going to go off right now. This is the mitochondria in this picture. Now, you guys have seen this picture before. You know it's mitochondria because they got little squigglies and stuff. And it looks like there's, 2, 3 of them in a cell? There are hundreds to thousands of mitochondria in any given cell. There are only 2. And they're really, really small. They're not big, giant balloon things. I hate that picture. It doesn't really give you an idea of what a cell looks like. And then when you go to graduate school and you're like, you see a real cell, and you're like, oh, well, that doesn't look anything. I've been lied to my whole life. Anyway, so the cell is the smallest unit of organization. And this is also what we're going to say for this class, and only this class. The cell is the smallest unit of life. We will argue about that again in a future course, in an upper level course, but for this class at this time, the cell is the smallest unit of life. Whew, that's hard to say. It's okay. All right, so that's the first core theme, organization. Second theme, life's processes involve the expression and transmission of genetic information. How many of you guys have heard of DNA? Yeah. Yay! DNA is a great word. It's deoxyribonucleic acid. So it's deoxyribonucleic acid because it's made of deoxyribose, and it's nucleic acid. It's the ultimate in winning Scrabble, too, because, true story. I was playing my good friend Tom, because that's apparently how awesome I am, is where I'm sitting down playing a game of Scrabble. And I hit triple word score with ribose. And then fine. And then I wrote, next round, deoxyribose. And then deoxyribose nucleic acid. No. Deoxyribose, and then, anyways, it went 3 words beyond that. And he's like, I'm done. This game is over. You're not allowed to use biology in Scrabble. So DNA is sort of that hereditary information. DNA is going to get transcribed into a molecule called RNA, ribonucleic acid. And then that ribonucleic acid creates the blueprint for creating proteins. And proteins do just about everything in your body. There is no process that I can think of that is not in some way mediated by a protein in your body. So that process of moving from DNA to RNA and RNA to a protein is called the central dogma of molecular biology. This is sort of what connects all biology together. So we're going to learn a lot about that transmission of genetic information. Now, in order for life to live, life needs energy. So third big theme. Transfer and transformation of energy and matter. We need energy. So where do we get the energy? When you need energy, where do you get it? Gabby, where do you get your energy? Not trying to trick you. What? Yeah, you personally. When you need energy, what do you do? I drink coffee. That's exactly what you do. You drink coffee. You eat, you drink, you take food into your mouth, and then it goes in, there's a whole thing it goes through. It goes into your mouth, and then it goes down into your stomach, and then from your stomach to your small intestines, and then your small intestines. All those nutrients get pulled out, and you can use those nutrients to build proteins, but also you can break them. And anytime you break chemical bonds, you release energy. So we can break bonds to get energy for us. Now, you drink coffee. That's awesome. Coffee is, where does coffee come from? How about that? Okay, I was just going to go with plants, but you know what? You guys went farther than me. Well done. Cacao, you guys are really into coffee. So they come from plants. Where do plants get their energy? The sun. They're photoautotrophs. Sun strikes the plant begins to create sugar. The sugar is then brought over to the mitochondria, which is the site of aerobic cellular respiration, where you're going to break those bonds, and you're going to end up creating a lot of energy intermediary molecules. You can use those to do work. So it's all about going from the kinetic energy of sunlight to the potential energy in the bonds of sugar, to breaking that, to creating kinetic energy, to let GABA do work. And that's what coffee's good for. When an organism like us uses that chemical energy to do work, muscle contractions, moving around, a lot of times what you're going to do is create heat. It's excess energy. It's that energy that's wasted to the system. We're not going to use it for anything. Your body generates a lot of heat. You know that, though. I mean, you get in the winter, you get under a comforter, right? Because that's the best place to be. Get under a comforter, and that comforter is going to trap that heat that your body's generating to keep you even warmer. And you just stay there and decide not to come to class at 9:30 in the morning. So it enters in as light and usually exits as heat. And in between, you're doing some work. Fourth theme, is that what we're on now? Yeah, fourth big theme. Organisms interact with other organisms in the environment. Every organism interacts with the other organisms. And I'm going to tell you a cautionary tale. It's a tale about kelp. Kelp and sea anemones. Once upon a time, in the wide oceans of the world, there were whales. And they were everywhere. I recently went and saw whales for the first time. Real whales, not like dinky whales, like big whales. And I was like, whoa, they're way smaller than I thought. Right. They eat a lot of small fish. Whales are carnivores, in case you didn't know. I had to call Richmond and correct the SOLs, apparently. The SOLs decided that whales were herbivores. Yeah, I know. My daughter came home with that, and they're like, oh, no, they're all carnivores. And I was like, she said, they're all herbivores. And I was like, I'm going to deal with this. These people don't know what a mitochondria is, and they don't know what a whale eats. Anyways, so we got these big whales. Well, the deal is whales also had oil in them. And if you know humans, we got a thing for oil. We really love oil. So humans in the 1800s went whale hunting, and we hunted them almost to extinction. What was it? 1980s, because love the 80s, right? There was a movie that came out called Star Trek 4. And in Star Trek 4, they had to save the whales. It was all about, we have to save the whales. Sure. Okay. Not just because they dive down, they cause water to be pulled down with them. Yeah, no, I get that. But even more important, whales are food. They eat, not for us, whales are food for killer whales. Now, the orca is called a killer whale for a reason. What's the reason it's called a killer whale? They kill whales. They hunt them. Killer whales, by the way, are not whales. They're dolphins. Now you know. They are the largest of the dolphin family. So they're evil dolphins that devour whales. That's what we got here. Problem is, their food sources went away. They couldn't hunt whales. Now, whales are big and full of blubber, so one whale would sustain a pack of orcas. With the whales gone, the killer whales, the orcas, have to switch to another food source. So in this case, they switched to seals. Now, seals are pretty big. They can eat seals, and it takes a lot more seals to eat than one whale. But they do. And then they get these cool images of, you guys have seen orcas hunting, where they'll beach themselves, grab the seal, throw it in the water, and chase after it? Yeah, it's pretty cool. So these whales have been eating seals. The seal population declined dramatically. They can't eat, so for every whale that they normally eat, they have to eat 50 seals. Well, they ate 50 seals. Now there are no more seals, so they have to turn to another food source. The sea otter. Now they're small, but they're pretty easy to catch. They're sort of hanging out on the surface. Go by, hump, 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 hump. Sea otter's gone. Sea otters, though, eat sea anemones. So if the sea otters are all dead, what happens to sea anemone population? It goes up. Sea anemones eat kelp. Not just kelp, they eat the bottom of the kelp. So when they eat the kelp bottom, the rest of the kelp floats to the surface. That's well eaten. No, because whales aren't herbivores. So the kelp forests are disappearing. Well, kelp forests are very important as a source for food. The baby fish live there. So if we have no more kelp forests, suddenly the fish population declines. So it's this idea of keystone species. You have all of these species interacting and having an enormous impact on the environment. Circle of life. We are continually interacting with our environment. We do it all the time. Of course, you're going to see a lot of things about putting pollution into the atmosphere. That's sort of what humans do. We just produce carbon dioxide like crazy. That's like our thing on the planet. Just if we find it, we're going to burn it in some way. It's just what we do. And it impacts the environment.